Welcome back to Mean Streets, a podcast where we investigate the best, worst, and forgotten movies of film noir and more. I'm Luke Deckard,
And I'm Matthew Booth.
and we are your cinematic sleuths. We have a cool show tonight. I'm really excited about this one, Matt. How about you?
Yeah, very, very much so. Looking forward to discussing this.
Yeah, no, so am I. Before we get into it, quick reminder to everyone: hey, if you haven't already, sign up to our Patreon. We got a bunch of cool perks that you can get. You can help kind of shape the show and help us pick films. We're gonna do YouTube lives and things like that, commentaries. You all get access to that. So if you haven't joined Patreon, like £1 at $1 a month get you a pretty good amount of stuff. $3 get you a whole lot more. But yeah, do join. And also if you haven't, do leave us a review on Apple Podcast and give us a star rating on Spotify. That also goes a long, long way. And if you're on, YouTube, like and subscribe and leave comments because those are also really helpful. But with that out of the way, Matt, let's get into this. What is the case today? What are we investigating?
Well, today we're investigating the Fallen Angels episode 1993's I'll Be Waiting, starring Bruno Kirby, Marge Helgenberger, and John Polito, written by C. Gaby Mitchell from a story by Raymond Chandler, and directed by none other than Tom Hanks, of all people.
Tom Hanks.
The logline for I'll Be Waiting is Eve Cressy hides in a fancy hotel awaiting the return of her vengeful gangster ex-lover from prison. She meets Tony Resek, the hotel detective whose attempt to protect her ends in violence. Now, did you reread the short story? I say reread, I'm assuming that you've read it before. Did you reread it in preparation for this?
I did. I really wanted to compare what the short story was like to the adaptation, because as you said, this is not the first time we've done a Fallen Angels episode.
No.
The last one was another Marlowe adaptation that starred Danny Glover, which I don't think I read the story in time.
No, I don't think I did either. I can't remember. I think I reread it. Maybe I did. I can't remember. But I particularly wanted to reread this one because it's not a Chandler story that instantly comes into my mind when somebody says Raymond Chandler.
No. But that stuff I want to get into. I want to get into a lot of that. But I guess just for anyone who hasn't listened to the previous episode, we'll briefly recap Fallen Angels. I think that's probably worth doing. This was a show on HBO way back in the early 90s. It was an anthology show, which, to think of it in terms of today, you would think of something like American Horror Story, kind of, which is more like anthology, but in its series. This was an anthology in that every episode was a brand new story. Kind of cool, They had stories based on Raymond Chandler, Jim Thompson, James Elroy, Mickey Spillane, Dashiell Hammett, Walter Mosley. A ton of really big powerhouse noir writers had their short stories adapted for this series that ran for 2 years, had 2 seasons, 15-ish episodes from 93 to 1995.
And it has some great guest stars. We've got people like Gary Oldman, Dan Hedaya does a couple of episodes, I think. People like Nancy Travis, John C. Reilly, Alan Rickman, Laura Dern, Gary Busey, Tim Matheson.
Yes.
There's a lot of people making Amix in it who will have been hot off Twin Peaks at this time. There's a lot of people who, have gone on to bigger and better things, like, Benicio del Toro's in one of them.
Yes.
Christopher Lloyd. It's just full of people like that were sort of, some are established stars, but a lot that are rising stars.
I think that's what's really interesting to me about this show is that it's not just attracting. It's not just full of young and up and comings. Like, yes, Kiefer Sutherland is in there when he's young. Brendan Fraser's in there when he's young. But Brendan Fraser is taking off in the early 90s. Tom Hanks is a massive star by this point in time.
Yeah,
this is a few years before like Apollo 13. So he's already done. I mean, he would have already done Forrest Gump and The Burbs and
Big,
things like that. Big,
you know,
he is household mother effing name right now.
yeah, and here he is, but with a cameo and in the director's chair of a 90s anthology TV series.
Yes.
I suspect cutting his teeth, but we'll get into that.
Yes. Yes.
There is
Yes.
there is a what we mentioned this on the last show that we did about Fallen Angels. There is always an introduction which is very 90s.
Yeah,
Although it's
let's say that for the episode because
you
this
want to save
one,
that, right? Okay, that's
yeah,
fair
when
enough.
we're diving,
That's fair
because
enough.
yeah, that was
Just
interestingly.
wanted to remind
Oh
remind
yes,
everybody that it does
I
exist.
it does, and I love it. And this one is different to the first episode that we did.
Yeah, it is.
This one has, yeah, we'll get there. This one is
We'll get
different
into that.
and
Yeah, we'll get
interesting.
into that.
Let's go ahead and go behind the camera and talk about the people who made this episode. And top of the bill is Tom Hanks, as
Top
we're
of the bill is
talking
Tom
about.
Hanks. How
So
could he not be?
yeah, so Tom Hanks, you know, at this point in his career, this is his third directorial credit. Before this, all he's done is an episode of Tales from the Crypt, another anthology show,
Yeah.
The League of Their Own, and afterwards he only ends up only having, over the course of his lifetime, only 7 directing credits, which is interesting to me. So I look at this episode and I see him in the director's chair, and he's a big star, and I mean, I'm like, okay, it's interesting that that he's clearly wanting to direct, or someone is asking him to direct, and he's saying yes. But the stuff that he's directing is, I mean, I want to say sort of very low tier stuff.
Yeah.
It's not big stuff. I mean, this show, The Fallen Angels, is a fantastic series, but wasn't a mega hit. It
No, it
only went
wasn't a
for 2
mega hit.
seasons.
Yeah. And
So,
it's in many ways it's sort of stock TV fare, isn't it?
mm,
As TV crime thrillers go from this period, it's just one of them, and
yeah,
it is strange that someone of Hanks's stature, is sort of getting himself in the director's chair on something like this. And Tales of the
well,
Crypt as well. I mean, I'd say the same about that from a horror perspective.
mm,
Vastly popular show, more popular and more successful, I think, than Fallen Angels. But it's the same sort of standard horror TV fare, isn't it? And yet you've
yes,
got this, like you say, star ascendant, like, as a driving force for some of the episodes.
yeah,
It's fascinating. I'd love to, and I've never heard him mention it. I've never heard him talk about it. So I'd
no,
love to know what the thinking behind it was, unless it was to just see if he was any good at to prove it to himself that he could direct a project.
yes, yes. I mean, it's the only thing I could really find is that he preferred to pour his energies into acting, and didn't feel that he had the sort of know-how, or the kind of the that sort of spark that you need to be a director.
Mm.
Essentially, he kind of, all I could really find is allusions to that. Him not feeling like he's best suited for the director's chair, and maybe that's the point. Maybe it is. There's stuff in this episode that I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think there's some cool shots which we'll get into. I think there's some good acting which we'll get into. So, I looking at this one episode, I'd say, well, you did interesting stuff. So I wouldn't say that you're not, you know, you don't have the aptitude for it, you know. But it's it is one of those things where, in terms of skills, maybe maybe not everyone has that skill set. Maybe they don't really necessarily feel
Yeah,
comfortable in it. I mean, as depending on what projects I'm kind of working on, there are certain types of writing projects that I know that I probably wouldn't be right for that, but I would
yeah,
be right for something else, and it could
yeah,
be something like that.
yeah, absolutely. I think that's what it is. And if that is what is behind it all, then I have to, a lot of kudos to Tom Hanks, because you can't be master at everything. If you can, you're a very fortunate person. And if he doesn't feel he's got the the chops or the attributes or whatever it is to be a successful director, then he does the right thing to walk away. Because if he doesn't believe it, no one's going to believe in any product that he puts out there.
Yeah.
You know.
Yes.
But what I would say to him, if by any miracle he's listening to this episode of Mean Streets, I would say, well, for what I've seen in this episode, you did have something of the chops to do more of this, and perhaps you should have done.
Maybe. I guess the other thing to think about with directing is it's not just the fun of having a story and bringing it to life. It is that sort of you are the head honcho, and therefore all the pressure, all of the intricacies. I guess it's quite famous when you think about William Shatner, who
Yeah,
directed Star Trek 5,
yeah,
and he had never directed. I don't think he directed before, or maybe he had a few like small credit. I think that is his directorial debut. I'm pretty sure, but he only got to direct a movie because he in his contract, because Leonard Nimoy got to direct some Star Trek. He's like, no, I want to do as well. So it was kind of a tit for tat situation, and that film is quite famous for the studio to be him be like, oh no, we're I've done it, we're done, and they're like, this is nowhere near ready, William. Like,
yeah, yeah. This is the
yeah.
opposite to what we think happened with Hanks.
Yes,
Well, if
yeah,
Nimoy's doing it, I want to do it. And that's like
yes, yeah.
that's
So
childish
it's
petulance.
Yeah, so it's kind of like that, like, not everyone has the chops for it, not everyone has the kind of the fortitude for it, I suppose. And if you can recognize that in yourself, I think that's speaks to a person's maturity and
It does. It definitely
grasp
does,
of themselves. And
and that's why I
I,
say
I
kudos
can't
to
fault him for
Hanks.
that.
Yeah, that's why I say kudos to Hanks. If that's the reason that he didn't do more of this, then I think he deserves nothing but credit for it and nothing but applause for being honest with
Yeah.
himself. You know.
Definitely, definitely. So I guess we've mentioned that this is based on the short story by Raymond Chandler. Same title, I'll Be Waiting, published in 1939. Is that the same year that The Big Sleep came out? Or was
Yeah.
that 38? Yes. So okay, okay. So do you? I I found it interesting Chandler's sort of thoughts about this story, just from
Yes.
a writing perspective. So it was published in a magazine called Slicks, and I found an interesting quote from Chandler. This is the one and only appearance, by the way, of Tony Resnick, the house detective for this hotel. From this short story, we can discuss if we would have liked to have seen more, or if it was best to be a
Hmm.
one off. But Chandler uh, basically goes on to say that he only really wrote this piece for the money, uh,
Yeah.
which, I mean, all writers do that. That is perfectly legitimate. That is how we
That's
make our
perfectly
living.
legitimate.
Not
That's what we
not
do.
every story, yeah, not every story is going to come from the depths of our soul. But about the story, he said that he didn't think much of the story, and when I wrote it, I felt it was artificial, untrue, and emotionally dishonest, like all slick fiction.
Yeah.
I love the dig at slick. I love the
I
dig
love
at
the dig
slick.
at slick. Yeah, I love the dig at slick. And it's a classic Chandler theme in it of it being honest. And
Mm,
if the piece, short story, novel, whatever it is honest,
yeah,
then and if it is emotionally honest as well as you know structurally honest and whatever, and characterization is honest, that's well, more than half the battle for Chandler. Um,
yeah.
and because he also says it, I think it's a bit later on in the same interview, it might be, but or a later one. He says some slick writing is very good on the surface, but it seems to lack something for me.
Yeah.
But perhaps I have a different idea about writing and shouldn't be saying this. you know, you
What I
think,
really go on.
yeah. Well, I was just going to say, you think, well, I think you've got as much right to say it as anybody else has, Raymond. And
Yes.
if you don't think your piece had the honesty that you want it to be, then maybe you're the best person to judge it. I don't know, but
Yeah. I appreciate his blunt honesty, but I appreciate it because he's not just like, for example, he's very famous for his Simple Art of Murder essay where he absolutely eviscerates British detective fiction. In
yes,
I think the best takedown that is applicable today, as it just as it was back then, almost 80 years ago. But I appreciate that he's also very honest about his own writing, and this doesn't necessarily feel like self-deprecating commentary. It doesn't feel like he's wanting the pat on the back. It's a good writer knowing when he's written something ah, average.
Yeah, no,
And
I agree.
I guess the question I have now is without going into the episode and spoilers of anything. I mean, I would say there's a lot of what Chandler's saying that I sort of felt while I was watching the episode, and I don't know if you did.
Yes, I did. It lacks a certain Chandler oomph for me,
Yeah,
and I think it's a little bit twee isn't the right word, but it's all a bit sort of
it was simple.
obviously, yeah, yeah, and it's not as realistic at its
Mm-mm.
heart. It's not as realistic or fatalistic or anything else that his other writings are, and I think I agree with him about the honesty of it. I don't think it's not as brutally honest as something like like The Long Goodbye is, or The Big
Mm,
Sleep is.
yeah,
I don't think he's really saying anything. He's
no,
just telling a story. He's telling a decent. I don't think it's a bad story, but it's a very slight story, and it's his shortest one. And
yeah,
I don't think he's saying anything particularly perceptive about it. But some of the themes are there. He's just not quite polished them, I think, is my sort of overriding sense of this story. And
mm,
it has something. It has a certain something of its own. But I do know what he means when he says it's slick. Without going into the plot too much, because we'll do that. We'll do that in a minute.
mm, mm,
But there is a sense of these events are all very neatly placed one after the other. To have an effect and a consequence.
mm,
Whereas in the novels, in the Marlowe novels, and even some of his like Mallory short stories that came before this, there's always that sense of fate playing a hand and that sense of real people in real situations. And I find this
yeah.
is just a little bit too polished and too slick. Well, he's got
Interesting.
the right word for it.
Yeah. Well,
So
Slick is the name of the magazine that it was published in. He wasn't calling
yeah,
the stories. He wasn't calling, and I
no, but I
I
think it is. I think it is very slick. I think he's
interesting because
it's
I
like
don't
a
at all.
don't you?
I know, no, I wouldn't call it slick at all. I would call it
Artificial is a better word. Maybe I mean artificial. Slick. I
yes,
mean
yeah,
slick in the sense that the story knows what it's got to do and it does it pretty well. But it's all very artificial. It doesn't have the ring of truth that the Marlowe novels have.
yeah. Because when I think of a slick story, I think of that as a positive. Oh, that's slick. They knew what they were doing. They did, that to me is like
Ah,
that
right,
that's
right.
good.
In that
Um,
case, I'll use the word artificial rather than slick.
yes, yeah. So I think that's more. So I mean, I guess it's interesting because this as an adaptation, it's pretty faithful,
Yep.
which we'll
I
we'll
think
get
it's
into
quite a
the
good adaptation. I think it's a good
yeah
adaptation.
yeah, and we'll get into the differences a little bit later. But the writing credits are interesting. So there's C. Gabby Mitchell is one of the writers. Didn't do a lot.
No,
Fallen Angels appears to be their first credit. Then worked on Blood Diamond, and then worked on a film called Get Low. Obviously, I'm aware of Blood Diamond, but I am not aware of Get Low.
I'm not aware of
Um,
Get Low.
and they were a script and content. They worked in the script and continuity department on Cinderella Man, which obviously I'm aware of that. And apparently they also have uh, a graphic novel called the Black Diamond Detective Agency
Mhm,
with an artist named Eddie Campbell. So pretty thin credits. You know, remember liking the film Blood Diamond. I don't know if it holds up today. If I were to go watch it right now, maybe it would still hold up, but I remember liking it at the time. So they're credited for the story for that. So, there's some
mhm.
they clearly kind of know what they're doing, but it's interesting that they that C. Gabby Mitchell didn't go on to do much else. Very, very, very few credits to their name. But they're not the only writer attached to this. There's also William Horberg,
Yeah.
who's a bit more accomplished to some degree. But one of the big credits on his list is The Talented Mr. Ripley, the Matt Damon one.
The Matt Damon one.
He's a producer on that. Which is so he seems to mainly be doing producing work. But his writing credits, I believe, is just this one. I didn't see him doing. I couldn't find him listed on anything else other than this.
No, I
unless you
couldn't
do.
either. No, I couldn't either. But I'm not sure. Was he not one of the? Was he not one of the sort of creators of the series, the overall series? Did I read somewhere?
Yes.
So, but no, I've not been able to find out anything about, other than what you've mentioned. He seems to be more of a producer than a writer.
Yes, yeah. But
I
for
mean,
some
he's
reason, he
produced a
has
whole
a writing
ton of
credit on
stuff.
this.
Yeah.
Yes,
So-
yes. So it's a little unclear if he actually wrote on this, or if he's just he is attributed as a writer for this episode.
He is, yeah,
But I don't know if that's just because of created by as a result of created by that he gets.
I think it
writing
might
credit,
be. I think it might be.
from doing some tweets.
One of the
maybe
things he
here and
was
there.
executive producer for is one of your favorite films, Luke, and that is Poodle Springs,
Oh yes, Poodle Springs.
which we will cover one day on this
One
podcast.
of these days. HBO and their Marlowe adaptations. Let me tell you. Mean Streets will return right after this. Who doesn't love a good boxing movie? Well, Steve Hunt presents the Boxing Movie Podcast. On each episode, Steve and his guests discuss a movie that has boxing as a theme. Do not be put off if you're not a fan of boxing, though. Of course, he covers the likes of Rocky and the sequels, but the depth of boxing-themed movies across cinema history is much greater than you might imagine. Boxing Movie Podcast has covered the early works of Hitchcock, explored the world of blaxploitation cinema and the golden age of film noir, with episodes covering The Setup, Champion, and Stanley Kubrick's Killer's Kiss. You might not have previously considered yourself a boxing movie fan, but after listening to a few episodes of the Boxing Movie Podcast, you may have to reconsider that view. Find the Boxing Movie Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. If you love Mean Streets, join us on Patreon and get exclusive perks, insider access, and a chance to shape the show.
Depending on the tier of your choice, get early episode access, your name in the credits, and have your questions read on air.
You can help us choose films for us to review, unlock exclusive commentaries and reviews, and join our members-only YouTube Live Q&As.
So slip on your trench coats, pull your fedoras down, and join us on Patreon today. Yeah, Marlowe Light, as we call it.
Yes.
But yeah, going back to the point, I think Horberg. My instinct was that Horberg is given a writer's credit purely because of the fact he was one of the creative forces behind Fallen Angels itself as a whole, so that he gets a sort of umbrella credit for the episodes.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because the other producer does not. So Steve Gollin doesn't get a credit. So maybe he did some work on this episode somewhere along the way.
Maybe he polished it or something.
Maybe he's responsible for like the ending or something, because it's interesting. He has a credit, but he has an actual writing credit for this. But this is the only one he has a writing credit for. So he must have done. Maybe he did something, since the other Steve Gollin doesn't have anything.
Yeah.
Hard to say.
What it is, I've not been able to find out. So
no,
if anybody knows, let us know.
Yeah, this is one of the frustrating things about Fallen Angels is it's the information out there is so limited.
Yeah.
And aside from the actors, a lot of people who worked on the show outside of the actors, they don't have, there's not a lot of information about them.
No.
Either. And even just trying to get a hold of the box set is very difficult. It's like, and it was only, I think we talked about this last time, but it was like, what, only released in Europe as a box set.
Yeah, and the image we've got here as a background is the copy that we've both got, I think.
Yes, the
And we
French
bought it, but
version.
we bought it at the same time, and it is the French version. So
Yes.
the menus are all in French, which really, but on the basis my French school French was like 40 years ago, it's
Yes.
a bit of a test. But yeah,
Yeah.
why it's not more widely known, who knows?
Mm.
But I mean, I suppose the Europeans would love this because it's it's American TV and all that business. But I think a lot of people would. I think it's well worth searching out. I think if if you're willing to pay for it, because
Yes.
it's an interesting series, but you will have to be prepared to pay for it.
Yes. Yeah. I
And
don't
like all
remember it
anthologies,
being.
there are some bad episodes, but there are some really really good episodes.
Yeah, yeah. I don't remember it being breaking the bank, but the problem that you'll have if you're in the States is you're buying something that is region 2 DVD that you'll
Yeah,
need
yeah,
region free or cracked DVD player so that you can enjoy those other regions on that their player.
yeah,
Should we talk about the cast?
yeah, yeah. And let's get into the cast.
So Bruno Kirby plays Tony Rezick. He starred in all sorts of things. He's one of those guys who his face, but you can't remember where from. He's
Yes,
that's
yeah,
that's who he is to me. That's who everyone in this episode was. Everyone in this
yeah,
episode was, I know that guy. I know her. Oh, I know him. Oh, but from where? I couldn't quite tell you. But
yeah.
I,
My
I you know,
my dad used to have my dad's best example of that was he always recognized Denham Elliott, but he could never remember his name. And he said he's just in everything, you
yes,
know.
yes, yes,
And that's what this fella's like. That's what Bruno Kirby's like. Because I was
yes.
thinking I know him from somewhere.
He's
But
been
you're
in
right. When you look
everything.
at what he's in,
He was he was in City Slickers, he was, When Harry Met Sally, he was in Good Morning Vietnam, The Godfather Part 2,
yeah,
The Sleepers, Donnie Brasco, but the thing is he's always sort of a bit player, right? So,
yeah,
I sorta remember
definitely,
him from When Harry Met Sally as being that sidekick to Billy Crystal's character, which he was kind of in a similar role in City Slickers. Um, and then in The Godfather Part 2, he plays the young Peter Clemenza.
yeah.
And that's kind of the main role that kind of shot him up. He did have other small appearances in other shows. He was in an episode of Columbo,
He is and he's in a very good episode of Columbo.
Yes,
It's one of
by
the best
dawn's
ones.
early light.
Yeah, it's one of the best ones.
Mm,
Patrick McGowan's fabulous in it.
yes.
But
So, he's got a lot of credits, but he is definitely a bit part kind of guy. How did you feel about him as the lead in this episode?
I actually quite like him. I
Mm,
think for what he is, I think he's very believable. For what he's supposed to
mm,
be, I think
yeah.
he's very convincing, and I think he's okay at doing all the Chandler tough guy act, and I think he's got some nice lines in it. Um, and he is, I mean, in the story, he is described as he's a bit portly in the story, from what I remember. So, you know,
Yes.
he's not
I
meant to
wouldn't
be a
call Bruno
Marlowe.
Kirby I wouldn't call Bruno portly, though.
No, he's not tall, is he? Well, he doesn't come
No.
across as being very tall, and
No.
so he's squat. Perhaps is a better. But I don't think he's meant to be. The character's not meant to be like Marlowe. 6
No,
foot.
but Rezik is meant to be sorta like a tall, fat dude,
Yeah, yeah. He's not.
and Kirby isn't he
He's
doesn't match
squat.
that, but that's not
No,
necessarily a big, it's not necessarily a problem, but he
no,
doesn't quite match the description.
no. I mean, how faithful do you need to be for something like that?
True. The one-off
But I
random
think
story.
I think in the confines of this episode, I think
Mhm.
he's certainly the one that carries it. He carries it pretty well,
Yeah.
and I think his performance is, on the basis this is a '90s TV series. I think it's pretty good. I think it's
Yeah.
it's convincing. It's got a bit of heart to it. I do like the final shot when he's just sat with Eve,
Mm,
as she sleeps, and he's just watching
mm,
over her. I think that, bearing in mind what has happened, which we'll come on to.
yeah.
Um, there's no detecting for him to do. He doesn't have to do any sleuthing, but he does have to, you know, play people, and
Yeah.
I think he comes across well on all those fronts, really.
Well, I sort of wonder if that's part of Raymond's Chandler's problem with this story is that bit right there, and that he doesn't really do anything. Information is just constantly handed to him.
Yes, he does. Yeah, he never has to find
And
anything
th-
out.
and that I found it's very unexciting when you're you're the hero of your story is constantly reactive.
Yeah,
It's I mean, as everyone knows, I'm a big fan of the show Smallville, and that's a very complicated show because Clark is not always a proactive hero. He's in a lot of ways very reactive, and there are moments in that series where it wanes, and you're like, "Can you just fucking do something? Can you just be like you have all these
yeah,
powers? Be proactive for God's sake!"
yeah, yeah,
And I wonder if that's when Chandler's calling this feeling like there's it's a little bit emotionally dishonest or it's he said he felt it was artificial. I think the artificial probably comes from that because he is, like I said, he is this woman is there and he's just sort of interested in her, and Carl the bellhop guy is just constantly giving him information and constantly telling him, oh hey, someone wants to talk to you, hey, someone wants to talk to you, hey, there's someone in that room, oh da 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 da. And so he's constantly reacting to the plot,
yeah. He is. Well,
and there's no real sense of who Tony Rezek is as a human being, I don't feel.
no, no, there's not. And you're right. So Carl gives him some information. In particular, there's somebody outside wants to talk to you. He goes outside. That bloke gives him some more information about someone who's already in the hotel. So
Exactly.
he then goes to see that person in the hotel who gives him some more information, and then
Yeah.
it culminates with one of the villains telling him the whole story of what's happened and what they wanted out of it. And
Yes.
then in the final 4 minutes, he does something, and he does something quite shocking. You know,
Yes.
so it would have been, even in a 30 man. This episode is only 30 minutes. So
Yes.
this is very quick, and it's not often I say this, but I think we could have stomached another 10 minutes
You could
of
have.
story, and maybe Tony could have gone and found out about this heist that had taken place and why this bloke was in prison, and this stolen money.
Mhm.
But and if he'd just done a bit of that, finding it out for himself, even from old back copies of newspapers, which it must have appeared in, so that he could at
Yeah.
least piece some things together, it might have
Yeah.
livened him up a bit. But
Maybe. I think the problem is that Chandler was trying to write a time-sensitive, high-pressure story about gangsters wanting to get into a hotel, to get to a girl, to get to the money.
yeah,
And none of that is important because none of that ever happens or comes close to happening.
no, that's it. Yeah, exactly. And
Her
I
life
found
is never
myself,
in danger despite them saying her life is in danger.
yeah, she spends all the time lying on a couch in the
Yeah,
lobby,
she's in the radio room. She's in the
fast
radio
asleep.
room just hanging out.
Yeah, she's so much
Okay.
in danger she can afford to get plastered and pass out. You know,
Yeah.
for
It's
everyone to
like,
see. And
all right.
I had a problem with the story as well for that, the original short
Yes.
story for that, in that
Yes.
I constantly found myself wishing I was watching and reading the story about the money being stolen,
Yes.
rather than them coming to recover it, and this hotel detective being a fly in the ointment. You know,
Yeah.
I really wanted to see the background to it, really, more than I wanted
Yeah.
to see this. That's not
Yeah.
to say I didn't enjoy it, because this is what I've got, and that's a criticism I have for Chandler as well, not just this episode.
Mm.
I think he's told the wrong story,
Yeah.
but
But I think he knew that. I think
but
he
I
know
think he
and I
knew that,
think
and I think you're
yeah.
absolutely right. He wanted to tell a story that had a ticking clock at the back of it, at a single location.
Yeah. But for whatever reason, Maybe it's time constraints, maybe it's lack of creative interest. I don't know, but for it just it it's a story. It doesn't fly. It just sort of hobbles along, which is what Tony Rezek does most of the episode and most of the short
Yes,
story.
that's right. Yeah, yeah. It just well, it does what it has to do, which is what he
Yes.
does.
Like,
Uh,
I was really interested at first in John, Polito's character. John Polito, again, another guy who's just in everything.
in
It's like, "Oh,
everything.
that
Yeah,
guy
yeah,
is
yeah.
just in everything." He plays Al Rezek, he plays Tony's brother, and, again, the dynamic of, oh, Tony is the good one. He's the good son.
Yeah,
He's a house detective, he's a snoop, he's a peephole guy, but his brother is a gangster. He's an
yeah.
actual criminal
And
who doesn't
again,
go see his mom.
yeah. Well, I think that's a really good line, and it's from the
I
original
do
short
too.
story. You know,
Yes.
and how's mum? He says, doesn't he? Al says, and
Mm,
Tony says something like, "Why don't you go and see her or something?" He says, "Tell her I was asking about her," and he says, "That's never enough. Asking about her is never enough."
yeah.
Paraphrasing a lot, but you know which bit I mean. And I thought,
Yes. Yes.
yeah, I want to know why these two are on the opposite sides. You know
Exactly.
what? Why does he not go and see his mum? You know what
Mm,
is it about that family? What where's the dad? And so again, I found myself thinking, there's another
mm,
story to tell here,
yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
not the one we're watching or reading.
Yes. I mean, the dad, any number of things could have happened to the dad. I mean, this is, was 1939, so, I mean, their dad could have died in the First World War.
That could have died in the First World War.
Dad could have died from the Spanish flu.
Well, Al could have,
Al could have
inherited
killed
some of
him.
his. Al could have inherited. We could have killed him yet, but he could have inherited some of his dad's tendencies, and perhaps his dad was the gangster, and
Maybe his
that's why
dad was a
Tony
gangster.
rebels against it.
Yeah, there's all
You
sorts
know,
of stuff,
we could write one of these for goodness sake.
You could,
So
you can take this story and go write a better story.
yeah, yeah, well, two perhaps two better stories.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think I'll
Yeah, I
go back to
agree.
my original summary of it, and that is that in the confines of what he has to do, I think Bruno Kirby's very good.
Mm,
I wish he had more to do.
yeah, I do too. I think when we kind of if we go back to sort of the direction of things, I on one hand, this story is about 90% faithful to the short story. Even in the kind of the mood of the characters. And I do think that from a directorial perspective, I think you could have encouraged just a bit more life from Tony Rezek, from Bruno Kirby. Just a bit more fluctuation. He's
Mm,
pretty he's he's kind of he's a very flat character, and a bit of a jolt of something. He only has one jolt, and that's at the very end of the story, which we'll get to later. But
mhm.
a few more, one other moment, two other moments that that show something unique and special about him would have been welcome, I think.
Yeah, and the fact that he likes Mozart is not enough. You know,
No, no.
they make not a big show, but that is obviously meant to say something about him, and it doesn't quite say enough about him.
No.
You know,
That's
how
that again, that's in the book or in the short story.
it's in the short story, yeah, but how does he first come across Mozart? I don't get
Yeah.
the impression that Tony and Al were rich growing up.
No.
So
No, but I
not that you have
guess
to be
if,
rich to be into Mozart, but you've got to come
yeah.
across him at some point. And where would Tony and Al come across Mozart
Yeah. Yeah, and
in the
I
life that I
maybe
imagine them having?
that falls into the artificial elements of it possibly. I'm not sure. Maybe he would go down to the, I don't know, local record store and listen to Mozart. Maybe it would be on the radio. It
Yeah,
must have been on radio. It must have been
I
cheap
think it's one of
concerts,
those things.
you know.
I think this is one of the artificial things. I think you're right on that. And it's one of in order to show that Tony is a complex character, we're told that he's got a dead end job with a gangster brother, but he likes Mozart.
Yeah.
So he
Yeah.
likes the finer
And
things in life. And that's
yeah.
not enough, that, Ray. you know.
It's not, but I mean, I guess if you're confined to a short story, you can't go into super in massively
No,
in
but I think
depth
you could find.
with that.
I think he could. I think maybe he could have had another pursuit that would have
Mm,
suggested he likes the finer things in life, or he likes beauty. You know,
yeah.
make him a
Sort of
sketch
JJ
guy.
Gittes thing where he's really picky about his
Picky
clothes
about
or
his clothes,
something.
yeah. And he'll only drink the best whiskey, or he'll only, you know, he always wants to eat in the best restaurants, but
Yeah,
can't really
perfect
afford it.
hair.
That sort of stuff, rather
Yeah.
than. I know in short story, obviously, you've got to have broader strokes than you would in a novel, and in a 30-minute TV show, more than in broader brushes than in a film. But I think you can make those strokes count with
Yeah.
a bit more
Yeah.
thought, and I think when he realised, as he became a better writer, I think Chandler probably knew that, and like you say, that's one of the reasons he poured scorn on this story, like later on.
Yeah, it definitely has that feel of, I mean, it has all the noir trappings. You've got your down and out detective, you have your beautiful dame that he's willing to kind of risk his life for a reason.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
you have your gangsters, you have your double crosses. It has all the noir trappings,
all
but
that.
it really feels like it does. I think he summed it up the best, and that is it does feel artificial. It feels like someone playing noir rather than writing noir. You know what I
Mm,
mean? It
yeah,
feels like
definitely.
that Smallville episode noir.
Yeah, it does. Yes, it does. It does. Although I enjoyed this more. Um,
Yeah, you know.
yeah. So,
Well, what do we think of Eve Cressy, played by Marge Hellenberger? Marge Hellenberger,
well,
Hellenberger. What a
she's
name, my dear
yeah.
Marge
There's a lot of G's in there.
Helgenberger.
There's
Jesus.
a lot of G's in there. But she's done loads as well, hasn't she? She's done like
Yeah.
is
Again, she's another sort of.
CSI, or is she
Yeah,
Law and
yeah.
Order or something? She's one of
Uh,
those American.
yes.
She
Yeah,
might even be
yeah.
both. But she's in films like she's in Erin Brockovich. Um,
That's her big
she,
role. If you look at her credits, everyone's like her she's really playing up. She was
she,
opposite Julia Roberts. It's your
yeah,
one film, sweetheart.
yeah,
It's your
yeah,
one film. I'm
yeah.
not
And I
being
say, well,
I'm being mean. I'm being a bit mean, but like it's
she
your
was
one
also
film.
in Species. It's
Yeah.
take what you will. Um, but she's primarily a, TV actress, and as
Yeah.
we've said before, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that.
No,
My
no.
problem
TV
with
voiceover
Eve
stuff. Yeah.
is I have no idea who she is. I don't know what she
No.
is. I don't know
No.
anything about her apart from the fact she used to go out with this gangster, and now she spends all the time getting thanked in the Hotel Windermere in full view of everyone listening to the radio.
Yeah.
That's all I
And
know
then
about her. I don't know anything. I don't get the sense that she's a femme fatale. I don't get the sense that I don't get the sense
mhm.
she's in any danger, really.
No, no, I didn't either.
Because I
No.
don't understand what's stopping these people coming in and just getting her.
Exactly. I mean, she's in the open lounge. You can just walk in, grab her, walk out. What are they gonna do?
Yeah,
Nothing.
what's Carl gonna do?
Yeah,
Carl's about
little
80 years old. What's he gonna do? You know,
exactly, yeah, I'm the same. I mean, she was stunning. She's beautiful to look at.
she's beautiful to
There's
look at, and
no denying that. But yeah, I'm like similar to you. I'm like, well, I don't, I don't know I don't know why we care about you. I mean, I do. I think Chandler sets up an interesting idea here that sort of reminded me a little bit of Lethal Weapon, and that is it's like, hey, look, you've been here for 5 days, you've not gone outside once, and he's basically saying, I'm worried about you. What's going on
yeah,
with you?
yeah,
And I buy that. I buy a hotel dick would pick up on some of these signs and
I
be
buy that.
concerned about someone.
Yeah, I buy
And
that.
then I really enjoy the story that she basically tells him to basically feed him a story and about kind of why he's just worried about her, and he feeds her the story about a woman who came to the hotel who um was doing similar things, and she's like, oh, what, she skipped the bill, and he's like, no, she actually paid the bill, then went upstairs and jumped.
Yeah, and
you
here's
know and her and
here's
her and he talks about what the sound was like when she
like a
hit the
gunshot.
ground. It's
Yeah,
very, very vivid stuff, which again, like I said, sort of reminded me of Lethal Weapon, where that opens up with the girl who's strung out on drugs, and then
yeah,
she actually
definitely.
does commit that fall. But I think for me, it was interesting because it sets up a possible interesting relationship between Eve and Tony, that unfortunately goes nowhere because he's clearly observing her. There's clearly something about her that he's drawn to. But because this is taking place over a single night, and this appears to be the first conversation they have, and then they really don't have any other meaningful moments or conversations afterwards or scenes together, you're just sort of like, if the story spun and it was he actually had to help her and protect her from some sort of danger and get her out, but in a different way, fine. But everything that was set up, unfortunately, then just poof,
Yeah,
goes
exactly.
away.
I agree with all that, and I think, well, first of all, here's story, I've lost count now, but story 3 or 4 that I'd rather read and watch. The girl who
Yeah,
jumped from the balcony.
yeah.
And that's a common theme for me in this in this review. Um, but I think you could easily. I agree. This is the first time they seem to have met, and he's
Mm,
instantly worried about her, and I question that.
yeah.
You know, does every girl he sees that's alone
Well,
in
he's
this
he's
hotel, does he
interested
think
in her because he's been watching her for days, but this is
he's been
their
watching her
first
for days? But
conversation.
yeah, well, yeah, but
So it's her first interaction with him, but it's not his first
no,
observation of her.
no, he's been watching her, but
Yeah.
you know, does he watch every single woman or woman who's alone and think here's another one that's going to jump off the balcony? You know,
Mm,
could he not possibly have? Could we not have had a scene where he sees her actually in her room on the balcony?
mm,
You know, could he not have? Could he not? Could we not have the sense that they have spoken before? Because you could do this in a short story. This is easily done in a short story, just by calling
mm,
them by the names, and by
yeah.
another night at the bar, Eve,
Yeah.
sort of thing.
Yeah.
So you can do all that quite quickly. And if he sees her on the balcony, I could understand then the psychological fear
Mm,
that history will repeat itself. So then he becomes obsessed with it and preventing it this time. Because the implication to me is that he failed. He failed last time, which again
mm.
is an interesting sell to me.
If that story is real, there's
If that
there's
story is real,
question marks over
I
that
mean,
one.
you see, I'd never questioned it. Well, I think I always thought it was, but
Yeah, see, I got the impression it could also be like the Flintcraft parable, uh,
well,
in
possibly,
the
yeah,
Maltese
possibly,
Falcon.
yeah, possibly. I'd not read it like that, but mate, yeah, that's fair enough. But assuming that it is true, that would give him
Mhm.
a reason to be obsessed with her.
Yeah, true.
Um, and that would deepen the whole thing. And then, like you say, he doesn't bother getting her out; he gets the gangster out instead. So,
Yes, yes,
so why do we care about her? He's more interested
yes.
in the gang. I know he's by getting him out, he's hoping to save her because they're going to get to him through her. But so what? Sort of thing.
Yeah.
The noir is off. I like my noir to have these women in it who are mysterious and who are either going to be like lethal, or they're going to
Mm,
need saving, or they're going to be his match or something. You know,
yeah,
she is nothing. She does nothing, and she
yeah,
conveys nothing
yeah.
apart from a woman who just, like I say, gets loaded and
Yeah.
lies on the couch in the radio room.
Yeah. Well, I think Chandler didn't know what to do with her because pretty much after this moment, and well, he has this moment with her. Then he goes outside, talks to his brother, blah blah blah. And the next thing is Carl's like, hey, there's some guy in 4B. And he's like, no, there's not. He goes, yes, there is, and it just happens to be her husband.
Yeah.
Which I'm like, if that's her husband, why isn't he just going straight to her room? I don't
Why is it?
understand why
Yeah.
he's.
Yeah.
I don't get that. And this
I
again,
don't get that.
this is where Chandler's calling his story artificial correctly, because it's like that doesn't really make any sense,
And
Chandler.
and how long's he been in this hotel? He's called
Well, I think
Johnny Rolls, isn't he?
he
He's called
just
Johnny Rolls.
arrived. He just
So he's
arrived
just
while
arrived.
yeah, there's a line from the clerk who makes it. I think it's either in it's definitely a short story. I think it might not, but there's something in the show as well. But yeah, basically it happens while I think he comes in while he's outside talking to Al. It happens while he's away. But it still doesn't make sense that he would come in and then just not go to his wife straight away, but go into the next room, literally the next room. Is that just a coincidence?
Yeah, so he doesn't
And
see her. He doesn't see
no,
her lying getting drunk in the radio room.
no, well, because she's gone back home. She's gone back up to her room.
Ah, right. But he'd still
She's
right. But he'd still go to a room, wouldn't he? I mean, that's
yeah. But I guess
I don't think
if
that.
he doesn't know her room, okay, but then it's still a huge coincidence you're literally right next to her.
Yeah,
Massive
yeah,
coincidence. Either
yeah.
way, this is where the story after the conversation with Al, the things that are happening are so contrived and sort of sloppy that you really just have to, if you want to enjoy what's happening, you just sort of have to do that I can't think things through and I just want to enjoy the scenes moment by moment
Yes, you
because
do.
on a whole it's now fallen apart and I just
Yeah.
need to enjoy the acting, enjoy the sets, enjoy the music.
Yeah, let's just say to yourself, "Well, we'll see how this plays out." You know. Um, yeah, I had the same feeling. I thought, well, this is what it is, sort of thing. Let's just. There's only 10 minutes left. Let's
Yeah.
yeah, let's move. Um, None of this is to say that I think this doesn't drag by any means, but it's not properly thought out. It's not.
No.
You know, if I were going to do an episode of Fallen Angels back in the '90s, and I wanted to do a Raymond Chandler one, and I'd already picked the Danny Glover episode to
Red
do a
Wind.
story out of Red. What's it called?
Red Wind.
Red Wind. There are other Raymond Chandler short stories that could
Yeah.
serve my purpose better than this.
Yes.
You know.
I agree. I do want to make a note though that it was Dan Hedaya who plays John Rails, who is Eve's husband. And he's the dirty cop from Mulholland Drive, and
He is the dirty cop from Mulholland
He's
Drive.
also Carla's dirty dirtbag ex husband in Cheers. So when
Yes,
he
he
came up, I
is.
was like, oh my god, it's
Yes, he
Carla's
is.
ex
Yeah,
husband.
yeah. I mean, he's brilliant in Mulholland Drive.
Yes. Well,
Um,
he's good in this as well. Like this is one of the scenes I wanted to talk about. This is where it's like Chandler's writing all of these very interesting scenes. They just don't belong in this story together. Is the biggest problem for me. Um,
yes,
because
that's
I actually really enjoyed the back and forth between Johnny and Tony, and even the cinematography. This is one of those cool moments where Hanks had the idea, or someone had the idea to shoot from underneath the glass table.
mm,
So they're looking up from the glass table. You see the gun up there. You see the whiskey bottle. You see the cup. You see the glass of whiskey. You're looking up at Tony. And there's another shot where you're looking up at both of them while they're there, and he pours a glass. It's a very cool. It's a very
it,
cool looking shot.
it is, and it's a good scene.
It is.
Because they're both good in this scene, and it's
Yes.
almost as if I've mentioned before how some actors have to up their game when they're opposite somebody who's really good,
Hmm.
and maybe dear old Bruno had to do a bit of that because Dan Hedaya is good in this. He's almost the best thing in it.
I think he is. Yeah.
Yeah, and when we get into the next scene when he's actually trying to leave the hotel it races towards its climax when he's in the car, the close-ups he has then when he's lit by the headlamps of the car in front of him,
Mm.
his facial expressions and the fear in his eyes is really really good.
Yes. Yes.
A day is great in this,
Well,
and
even back in the hotel room when John or when Tony says, "Oh yeah, she's in the next room. She's and he does this
yeah,
thing where he just sort of goes over to the wall and he just kind of caresses the wall like
yeah,
I'm so close to you, but I can't get to you yet, you
yeah,
know. And then when he has that moment of pause outside of her bedroom door, you know,
yeah,
it's like he he definitely stole the episode. He was by far acting well beyond what, not to say no one else was acting well, they were, but he was the one like channeling a higher level of performance
yeah.
than
He
I
is,
think
he is,
everyone else.
yeah. Almost like almost, but not quite to the extent that it rises above TV, but it's
Yes.
not performance wise. It's not quite, but he's on the way
Yeah.
to do that.
It's almost like maybe he should have been Tony Rezick.
Well, maybe he should have been. Maybe he should have been Tony Resi. Yeah,
I
yeah.
think
Maybe
they
he should.
miscast on that a little bit.
Maybe,
It's harsh to
maybe.
say, but there's an element of that with them. Like, I don't know if they cast, I'm not sure if they cast right for Tony. I don't know. He
No,
did
no,
okay.
but
Bruno did
you know,
okay, but
he does
eh,
okay. He does okay. Like I say, in the confines of what he's got, he does okay. But I would have liked to have seen him do more.
yeah,
But the minute Hideo comes on screen, the whole thing shifts. It shifts gears almost immediately.
yeah.
And starts becoming quite interesting, and starts to. It still doesn't make any sense. I
No,
don't
yeah,
think it makes
no.
any sense still, but um, and it's such a simple getaway plot that Tony's come up with that I'm not sure Johnny would have gone along with it really. But
Yeah,
you have to sort of put, like you say, you have to put those irritations to one side and say, well, we'll just see how it plays out then. Fair enough.
yeah,
So you kick off your shoes and you lie back and you say, come on then.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's true. It's true. Should we talk about our cameo from our boy Mr. Hanks?
Yeah, let's talk about Mr. Hanks. Do you buy Mr.
Now,
Hanks as a tough guy? Well, he's
n-
called Trouble Boy number one.
yes, I did not buy him as intimidating in the slightest. It's Tom Hanks, the nicest human on the planet.
It's the kid out of Big
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
in
Forrest
dress up.
Gump. Yeah, it's his little goatee that he had was a little bit just like ugh, it was like a gross 90s perv goatee.
Yeah,
Uh,
don't like that. Don't like that.
and I kind of don't even know why he's in this. I don't know why, I guess, he says, I guess he's made it clear that he doesn't feel he has the chops for directing and prefers acting. So thought he would also get in front of the camera for this.
Well,
I don't
I
know,
think he should have been the
but
clerk. I think he should have been the desk clerk.
that would have probably been a much better job, or the bellhop. He could have been Carl.
Or he
Although
could have been
Carl was
Carl.
played by Dick Miller, who is the pawn shop clerk in Terminator 1 who sells Arnold the guns,
Yes, he
and
is. Yes, he is.
also is in Tom Hanks is the garbage man in The Burbs, which is a Tom Hanks film. So I wonder if that's why he's in this.
He might be doing him a favor, I suppose. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, was wondering
But
about
I,
that,
but
but
I,
yeah,
I think Tom Hanks as the desk clerk would have been especially if he had the glasses on. Yeah, it would have
would
been
have been better.
a
Yeah,
better sort of disguised cameo that would
yeah,
have played more um to Hanks's strengths, because I don't buy
yeah.
him as a tough either. You
No,
know,
no.
I can't imagine him doing anything that is required for a man of that position to have the status that he has.
Mm-mm. But even just his, and I guess this is where it's tricky because even Hanks's delivery, like line delivery,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's all too
it's
nice.
yeah, it's too nice, and this is where it's like, okay, in this moment, you need a good director to tell you how to play this role
Yeah, yeah.
because you're not doing a very good job, sir.
No, you're not, Mr. Hanks. I'm afraid. Because at one point he said, at one point really what he's doing is demanding his money back,
Yes,
and
from a
he's
guy who like isn't even involved in any of this.
yeah, yeah,
And
and
he's also murdered the two people
he's
who are involved in it.
who are involved in it, yeah, and then
Al,
he's complaining that he's not got
yeah.
his money back.
No, he's killed
Yeah,
Al and he's killed Johnny,
and he's
who are the
killed
two
Johnny.
people involved. The
So
third person involved would be the girl,
would be the
but at no
girl.
point does he go after the damn
No,
girl.
doesn't make any sense. No,
God.
and but when he said, essentially what he's saying is, "I want my money," and I think he should be saying it in a way that, whilst polite, because that's what all these gangsters always do. Is you think Kirk Douglas and Out of the Past? He's extremely
Yeah.
polite and
Yeah.
charming, but he's
Yeah.
lethal underneath it.
Yes. Yeah.
When Tom Hanks says something along the lines of "We just want our money," he sounds like
Mhm.
he's, you know, he sounds like he's having a go at his parents for not giving him pocket money. It's like, "We just want our money." It's that
Yeah.
sort of whiny, like sort of, you know, naff way of delivering it that
Yeah.
carries no threat whatsoever. And
Yeah. You kind of, if he was playing it
these need
more
to be a
like
serious threat, and they're not. They're
y-
not a threat at all.
no, if he was playing it more like was it Gina Carlo on in Breaking Bad, playing the fish the chicken guy, you know?
Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
that works because he's someone who you don't suspect and doesn't look like someone who's going to be a deadly gangster, but then ends up being incredibly deadly and scary.
Yeah, exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
but this is where this is where the story has deviated dramatically from the short story. And basically once in the short story, once Johnny leaves, it's kind of it. The story's
Yeah.
over.
Story's done.
Tony gets a phone call about his brother being killed. The Tom Hanks character calls Tony and says, "Hey, I've killed your brother. Bye."
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Yeah. And then Tony just
And I'm
goes and sits in the lounge.
and I'm not sure. I don't know if I misread this or not, but does I don't does Johnny also die? Because I only remember him mentioning that I killed your brother.
Yeah, no, I don't think Johnny.
I don't think he does either.
I don't think he
I'm
does.
Yeah.
If he does, it's so subtly done that I've overlooked it as well when I read it when I reread it.
Okay. Okay. So the film changes things and where after Johnny leaves, we blatantly see that he's been shot, but then Tom Hanks comes to the hotel and for some reason makes Tony leave with him and get in the car, and I guess they just drive around the block, and they do a sort of cheap gag in that scene, and is the scene where Hanks is telling him, "I want my money, da 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 da," or you're gonna end up like him, and the
Mm,
camera pans over, and Al's dead body is just lying there,
yeah.
and then Tony reacts to his
Then he
dead
comes
brother,
out of himself. Yeah, then he comes out of himself.
and it's like, dude, you would have seen the dead body because then they also look down the floor, and they see
Yeah,
Johnny dead on the floor. I'm like, are you? Is this where like, oh, he's just such a tough guy. He's not going to pay attention to the dead bodies. He's going to listen to the. But it's like no, because then he actually reacts to the dead bodies.
yeah,
So it's
yeah.
like, no, 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 no,
The
no,
car's not
movie or
that
TV
dark, is it?
show.
Yeah, the car's not
Yeah.
that dark. So I was just looking at the end of the short story, and he says, because Johnny's living under the name Watterson, isn't he? He's under the assumed
Yes.
name Watterson,
Yeah. That's it.
and
Yeah.
he goes to he calls the garage, the hotel garage,
Ask if he's
and
left.
yeah, and says the guy Watterson I gave a card to. Does he leave? And they say, sure, Tony, half an hour almost. Is it your charge? Yeah, Tony said. My party, thanks. Be seeing you. He hung up and scratched his neck. That's the last we hear. That's the last we hear of
Yes.
Johnny.
Okay. So yeah. So Johnny got away.
Johnny gets away. Yeah, Johnny gets away. Johnny gets away.
Okay. Okay.
So, I mean, I do like, I do think being confronted with Al's body is more visually dramatic than getting a phone call, obviously. But
Yes.
I,
But
it's just
you would
it's screwed up because
react
it's in
to
the
it the minute you
he's
get in
sitting
the
in the
car.
seat in the car.
Exactly. The only cool thing about that scene, and the only cool change that is loaded with other problems, but he's like, oh, let me take my brother, let me take him, because Tom Hanks is driven around the block, and is saying, give me the girl, or this is going to happen to her, which is the first time you feel there could be a sense of danger involved with the girl, and he tries to take his brother's body, which I'm like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do
Yeah,
with that body?
yeah.
Where are you going
Because
to put it?
compared to him, Al is massive.
Huge. Um, but I do think that was part of his ruse, because he does slip into his pocket and grab Tony's gun.
Mm.
And in other films or TV shows, there would be a moment of hesitation. There'd be a exchange of words. But I do like that Tony doesn't hesitate and just blows both of their heads off.
Yeah, and it is. Yeah, I like that, and it is shocking. I mean,
Yeah,
not shocking in the sense that it stunned me into silence, but because he's done nothing for the last 25 minutes.
he finally does something, and
It
it's
is a bit. It does
insane.
make you go, oh, right. Makes you sit up and take notice all of a sudden. Um,
Yes. Yes.
but I have another problem with. I have another problem with it, which is the last time we've seen um, Al and Tony together, there was no indication that they were on speaking terms, even,
Mm.
or that they were in any way friends, despite the fact that Al doesn't speak to the mother anymore
Yeah.
for reasons we don't know.
Yeah.
And I think I would have liked to have seen some sort of building of bridges so that Al's death meant a bit
Could
more.
means that. Yeah. It means nothing.
It means nothing. He's a gangster
Yeah.
who got shot because he nicked a load of money.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
what?
Yeah.
I've no sense of their relationship as brothers.
No.
For me to what the show is doing is saying these two are brothers, so you have to accept that he feels bad that his brother's been murdered and wants revenge. I said, well, you've got
Yeah.
to show me that then. You know,
Yeah.
you
Well,
know.
I see. Interestingly, I didn't actually take it that he wanted revenge for his brother. I took it that because Tom Hanks then threatens the woman. He said basically this is what's going to happen to the girl because he thinks that she knows where the money is. That's when he
Oh
shoots her.
well, I took that as well, but I
Yeah,
also thought there was
that
an
still
element
has the
of,
same problems of like, but why does he care so much
but
about the
why does he
girl?
care? Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
it's
It's the old
yeah,
story, isn't it? It's the old story. This is a payoff without any build up.
yeah, definitely, definitely. And then he just
We're
goes
not
back. He just
invested enough for it to matter.
no, and then yeah, but then Tony just goes back, tells the bellhop he didn't see
Yeah, yeah,
or hear anything, even
yeah,
though there's a car sat outside the hotel with four dead bodies.
yeah, and
Where's that gonna go? Who's gonna move that?
yeah, yeah, exactly.
But Tony doesn't care because he's
Well,
just gonna go back to the radio room and
it's just
sit
gonna
and
go and sit and watch her
watch
sleep.
Eve sleep.
Yeah,
All
as the
right.
camera very nicely and slowly and artfully like pans out from him. Yeah,
Yes.
but this is a city centre hotel, isn't it? This isn't a hotel in the middle of nowhere. So
No.
are all these streets deserted?
Downtown LA.
Yeah,
Well, it's
yeah,
middle of the night. It's 2 o'clock in the morning or whatever. It's middle of the night, and so like I can buy that. There's like it's empty, but even in the beginning of Raymond Chandler's story, when the short story when Tony goes aside to meet Al, there is life happening outside.
yeah. I don't think
He
LA
makes a
is ever.
note of it in the story. He makes a blatant note of what is happening
Yeah,
outside. So,
I'm not sure Chandler's LA is ever like totally silent.
mm,
I think there's always some skullduggery going. So somebody
yeah,
is out somewhere. Um,
yeah, yeah,
you know, there are other people in the hotel presumably who might be on the balconies, not contemplating jumping, getting a bit of night
yeah,
air, can't sleep.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
there's so
yeah,
there's so many. It's as if, like you said before, he just wants this one place, but this one place appears to be like a world of its own, where only these four people exist or five
yeah,
people exist. And
yeah.
that's a big pill to swallow. I think.
Yes, yes. And it's almost like everything that happens in the episode literally takes place in the 30 minutes.
Yeah, yeah. There's no sense that this is happening over a period of time.
No,
You know,
it
and I
there
think it
might
would
be
have
some
improved it if
times.
there might be somewhat.
Yeah,
Sorry.
there might be some like observations of clocks throughout the episode to side of show time, but it does feel like everything that happens in it is in everything is it feels like it's happening in real time, as in the minute the show starts, that's your ticking clock. In 30 minutes from now, he's gonna blow these guys' heads off and then just gonna sit in the radio room.
Yeah. In 30 minutes' time, over 50% of your cast are going to be dead in the same car.
That's true.
Yeah, and I think it would have improved it if there'd been some sense of um, time passing, so that we see those 5 days at least
Something.
occur.
Yeah, something. Yeah.
And we know you can do that with dissolves and even to show the monotony of hotel staff life. So
Yeah.
the clerk comes on doing his bow tie up again, and you know, another day,
Yeah.
another dollar, Carl, that sort of thing. And
Yeah.
just so that we can see something of these people being people rather
Yeah.
than just being
Well, as
names.
an adaptation, I would say, look, like, come on, make this an hour because the Red Wind was an hour. I was shocked that this was over within like 30 minutes. I would
So
have
was
said,
I.
take some liberty,
Yeah,
pad yourself out with another 30 minutes, and write some new stuff.
yeah, yeah,
But
absolutely.
they didn't. But they didn't.
Well,
Um,
this is a thing for adaptations, isn't it? We've said before that if they're too slavish, and this is quite until the end, this is very faithful.
yes.
But if they're too faithful, they can get bogged down.
Yeah.
And if you look at series like the Granada Sherlock Holmes series, that take some 20-page short stories but make an hour's TV out of them because
Yeah.
they elaborate on some
Yeah.
plot points. I think that's how you do it. And this
I
could have
agree.
really, really stomached at least another 10, 15 minutes, if not another 20, to
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
to breathe some life into all these people and give them a bit of urgency and a bit of
Yeah.
agency.
Yeah.
And most importantly of all, I think if this is all to protect Eve, he's got to have more of a relationship and a connection with Eve. I'm not necessarily saying a relationship as in they must get it on, but
Mhm.
he's got to have a
Mhm.
connection with her that is more than this,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you could easily, if you were a decent enough screenwriter, write that and make that up
Yeah.
yourself.
Well, I think the key problem here is they were slavishly true to a story that the author felt was artificial to bring it all
Yeah,
back around.
yeah,
And that's
yeah,
that's the biggest problem with all of this is it doesn't ring true, and they were, they stuck so closely to the story that they didn't deviate, and therefore all those same problems of the short story fall onto the adaptation as well because of
exactly.
how close to the chest
Yeah,
they play it.
they should have
Uh,
listened to Chandler.
They should have done. They should have done. Now, one thing we didn't mention, and we should mention before we wrap this up, is we didn't talk about the opening credits because these
Oh
are
right,
these are
yes,
different. These are
yes,
different. So last time we talked about them, there's some sexy noir music playing, and there's a lot of sort of uh, panning over a beautiful woman's body, femme fatale's body.
yeah,
Um, this one is similar but different, and that there's a lot of sort of we're watching a woman get dressed, but there's
yeah,
this seductive narration happening along the way. Um,
yeah.
Lines like a hotel's the loneliest place in town, and
Doesn't she say
you
apart from the morgue?
apart from the morgue, and you'd be surprised how complicated they can be. And a hotel's just a stop on the way to some other place. Like there's some kind of like fun, cheesy noir lines happening in there.
Yeah.
But
Well,
I don't know.
those are
How did you feel about it?
that is what I felt. Those are COD Chandler
Yeah,
lines, aren't they? You know,
yeah,
if,
yeah,
if you were asked to, if you were at some sort of writing retreat and you were asked to spoof Raymond Chandler, you write that, wouldn't you?
yeah,
You know.
yeah.
So personally, I think I might have said this last time. Personally, I could have done without the whole thing.
Okay.
Um, but given that it's there, you just sort of have to say, well, this is so 90s. And uh, it's a bit of fun. I can't really, I can't say I love it.
Mm.
And like I said, I can't, but I don't hate it. It's just
No,
I could forward wind it and not really think I've missed anything, quite frankly. Um,
sure, sure. I didn't mind it. I for some reason I kind of liked it. Just I know that it's cheesy and I know that it's hokey and stuff, but I in general I sort of feel like the Fallen Angels is generally a rather kind of cheesy and hokey at times.
yeah, absolutely. I
It's
can.
it's sort of it's not trying to be a let me mean here. It's not trying to be a tough and honest adaptation of noir material. It
No,
is they are playing there is an element of sort of juvenile fun with this series.
yeah, I can go along with that. I can go along with that. But even so,
Yeah.
even
So I
so, I
don't
don't
mind it
really need
because
to.
I guess I don't mind it because of that. But
Yeah, I
you
mean,
know.
there's a lot of those like silk curtains blowing around through windows and things, and she's walking through
Yes.
them and not getting tangled up in them and all this business. And
Yes,
and
yes.
I think, but it's a product of its time, and it's just a bit dated, I suppose. And it's perfectly harmless, but I don't think it's necessary. And
Sure.
but would it be Fallen Angels without them? Because there's what I think
Mm.
there's one on every episode. They do change. They do change, but certainly of all the I've not seen all the episodes, but certainly the ones that I have, there's been an introduction like that.
Yeah.
You know, that is it's a bit like when Roald Dahl used to do introductions to Tales of the Unexpected on British TV in the 80s. And he
Yeah.
used to give a little sort of anecdote that was vaguely relevant to the story you were about to watch, you know,
Yeah.
and to
Yeah.
me it's a sort of hangover of that sort of
Yeah.
thing.
Oh, I do think that's kind of what they're going for, but they clearly get tired of it because the show stops them after I think it's just the first season that they're on.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
I
it's just
think
the yeah, yeah. They don't last
yeah,
they don't last long. They do not last long. Um yeah, it's just a hand because I can't remember the lady's name who is
no, she has
she
got a
has
character name. It's
yeah, her credits are thin as are very, very thin. Lynette Walden is her real name, but she's only listed as doing a handful of these episodes. Because yeah, they dump this sort of intro and go another route and go another route.
yeah, but she has
Faye friendly.
Faye friendly. I mean, again,
The host is the host.
you come up with a 1940s noir detective story female character name at your writing retreat, and I bet somebody would come up with Faye friendly.
Yeah, I mean, it's Faye friendly is one of those names even that's like that's like that's such a bad name. That's such a bad writer came up with that.
Yeah,
That's just a bad idea. That's the okay, cool. We got the bad ideas out of the way. All right, what's the good ideas? Like if you want to have like some sort of playful name, that's almost sort of Bond-esque, like get the bad ones out first, like Faye friendly, and then come up
yeah,
with something, you know,
better.
give her like a French name, like think about Hugo Drax. His name means dragon
Yeah,
in
yeah,
in
yeah,
uh,
absolutely.
Moonraker. Do
Yeah,
something like that. Give her a French
yeah,
name that means friendly, and then whatever that make the alliteration work with that. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah,
Not hi, I'm Faye
absolutely. Yeah.
friendly. All
Well,
right.
you know, Dracula was originally going to be called Count Wampir, which is a sort of a bastardization of vampire, obviously. And then
Yeah.
he comes across the word Dracula, meaning son of the dragon,
Yeah.
and you know, it was just a
Everything
better name.
changed.
It's just on every scale, it's a better name. So
Yes.
yeah, you're right. Do something like that. Do something like that. It's a bit like when Chandler calls his first attempts at one of his first attempts at a PI, he calls him Mallory,
Yes.
because he is
Yeah.
the sort of knight errant, and
Yeah.
Mallory wrote the Arthur legend, and you think, oh, come on, Raymond,
Yeah.
that's
I d-
that's a bit on
I
the
don't.
nose.
It is, but I don't quite mind it as much. I don't
Oh, I
quite
don't
mind
mind
it.
it as much as Faye friendly. Don't get me wrong, but it's that sort of with experience come better names, don't they?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Well, should we rate? Should we rate this
Shall
bad
we
boy?
rate? Yeah, I don't know what to do with this. I'm really torn on this.
Well, as you know, or if you don't, if you're listening for the first time, we rate all of our films out of 5 Falcons, 1 being the worst and 5 being the best. I, l- look, I got it. The short story has lots of problems. This has
Yeah,
lots of problems. It is well acted. There is some cool stuff in it. Visually, it's nice. But if I'm being honest, like on an on a story and a structural level, it's pretty bad.
yeah,
So I'm
yeah.
probably gonna have to give it 2 Falcons.
Well, yeah, I was going. When I said it was difficult, I didn't know whether to give it 2 or be generous and give it 2.5.
Yeah,
I find it the original story as well, and I don't want anything that I've said to be an indication that this TV
I think
episode
we've been pretty clear that they both
is
suck.
bad. It's both. Yeah. So it inconsequential is the word that's crossed my mind about this. It's neither here nor there.
Yeah,
So it passed half an hour of my day, but that's about it. And it was a pleasurable enough half an hour. I'm going to say 2 Falcons as well. It's artificial, it's inconsequential, but it's got good acting in it and some good shots,
Yeah.
but it doesn't
Yeah.
make a whole lot of sense. So,
No. You're not
so two
gonna
Falcons.
feel like you've wasted your time, even though you did just waste your time.
Yeah,
You know?
you're not going to feel you wasted your time, but nor are you going to say that was so good. I'll watch it again right now.
Yeah, I never need to see this again. Put it that
No,
way.
no.
It's whereas I would be tempted to rewatch Red Wind. I would be interested in seeing that
Yeah,
again.
well, that was doing
Nothing.
something. Um, you know, go back and listen to our episode on it because that was doing some interesting things. It had interesting ideas and it had something to say, and it had a lot more time to breathe than this. This was sort of strangulating itself with its runtime.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think we've thoroughly investigated. I'll be waiting for you. I think I had to remember the name of the episode there. Sort of it was just so boring. No. I think we've
Yeah,
thoroughly investigated. I'll be waiting. I think there's nothing. I don't have more to add. Do you have any other
I
closing
have
remarks?
nothing more to say about I'll be waiting. No.
All right. Well, I think we can seal the file. We can put it in the drawer. The case is closed. It's two Falcons from both of us.
Yep.
Um, you know, go watch it if you want. Go buy this show on DVD if you can. It's worth owning. But for us, I think that is all we can say for I'll be waiting. But we will be back next week with another case. So in the meantime, like and subscribe and leave us a review if you haven't yet. That goes a long way to help us out. But remember to take care walking down those mean streets. So we just want to give a quick shout out to our paying patrons. We have Steve from the Boxing Movie Podcast.
We have Garm 1981.
And we have Gregory Sandoval. They are our initial ground floor patrons. So if you want to join Mean Streets and become a patron and get access to cool perks, make sure you head over to our Patreon page and subscribe today for as low as $1 a month.